when someone understands you and listens to you and hears your voice or feels what you're doing, your expression, then there's nothing more fulfilling.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. Super grateful to have you here and listening in. We have a very special guest this episode. It is a little bit different from a lot of the people that we've been interviewing lately, but it's some stories that I'm really excited about highlighting here moving forward. We have a great individual here that I met through Southern Illinois University Carbondale. And he is an artist. He is a visionary. He has a wealth of life experience and knowledge. And I am really excited to introduce Mr. Zen to y'all. Zen, how you doing today?
Great. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad to have you here. Thank you for coming on the show. I think I just want to dive right into it. And what I'm super curious about your story is I know that you're an artist and I've seen your work. I've seen your work ethic in the shop. I've seen how much passion and energy you put into not just your projects, but also learning new things and new skills. And with that, you've spent hundreds of hours on a piece. You've poured your soul into them. And then you've also been to, worked with, and experienced Burning Man, where they literally burn the art. So is there any pieces that you've ever worked with that you've just felt like, hey man, I want to burn this, I want to destroy this, and then maybe find some sense of freedom from that?
Well, honestly, no. And I always admire and I'm curious about the people that do. It's kind of like a phoenix rising metaphor from your art and yourself. And I think I do that more individually as a person than I do in art that I create. There's stuff that I've done that I just don't have the heart to destroy it. I may watch it decay naturally. I mean, right now on my studio grounds, I've got a couple logs that I carved into fertility figures that are one's toppled over and the insects have gotten into because it's wood. And I just, watch it and I kind of hope that maybe I could still make something out of that. And as a scrounger, I think that's probably more aligned with my own way of burning something. It's just metamorphosizing it into something else.
Gotcha.
I used to love like dumpster diving because sometimes, particularly like around art schools, you'll find art students will throw away some of their stuff, canvases that can be reused and ceramics or whatever. And I've made some interesting pieces out of work that other people have started. And I've incorporated that as a kind of a seedling to the work that would be created out of it. An example would be I was in San Francisco and they have used to be the San Francisco Art Institute, which I think is now closed. And I had a friend that was a counselor there and I was just kind of visiting. They had a big dumpster and I looked in there and there was a 4x5 canvas and it was an image of a face. I don't know if it was a self-portrait or not because you don't know who the artist is. And across the mouth, someone had painted Xanax. Like so many people are on drugs and antidepressants, it seemed
Right.
apropos. The tortured artist, like a lot of young
Hmm.
artists or other artists will use that as a theme, like I'm a victim, I'm tortured, I'm going through something, and I don't belong, and all these other things. And that feeds into their art, and they're working through stuff, for themselves and for other people. And sometimes that ignites something in a viewer, where they create a dialogue with it. And other times it's like, man, you got some messed up stuff going on here, and it's all good, whatever people want to do is great. Anyway, I took that piece and I lightly whitewashed over the top of it. And then I found in the trash near my girlfriend's house, I found a shopping bag for Christmas that said joy on it. So I took the paper, the joy part, and I plastered it over the image. So you had this assemblage, collage of joy, Xanax, and a fading person in the background. And it actually was pretty good, So that's an example of, using something else as baseline material for work that you plan to create. And my own trash and other people's trash is perfect for that. You can call it found object, but it's really found idea that you metamorphosize, morph into something else. So I love doing that.
That's really cool. I really like your story, and I like the way that you took something that looked tortured, looked distressed, looked like it was someone's expression. Maybe it's their soul crying out, trying to work through something in their life, work through something, and by creating a new image, a new painting, a new sculpture, whatever, they're going through a process of change. And you kind of mentioned tortured artists. So a lot of times we hear about tortured artists, starving artists, and it's a difficult world. It's a difficult niche to get into. And I just want to kind of maybe like pull on that thread a little bit. You have a lot more experience in the art world than I do. Tell me about that starving artist play. Is it almost like a status that's to be expected? Or is there a reason that maybe I'm not seeing behind it that causes that to be the case more often than not?
I'll answer that, but I'll probably not answer it in my answer because I think that, we're all humans, we're all souls, we're all doing the best that we can with what we have and trying to get by in life. So an artist is not that different than the average Joe on the street. Everybody looks a particular way, normal, but in reality, you don't know what someone's carrying around inside their little heart. And to say that an artist is tortured, hell, they probably have 20 neighbors that are tortured and that have experienced spousal abuse, domestic violence, financial problems, problems with their kids, being unable to get along with others, communication problems. Everybody's got this going on and we're all dealing with it. Now, where an artist is different is they kind of have a voice in their work. I worked in steel factories and the guys that I worked next to, they weren't going to pour their little hearts out to you. They're there to work. They get their paycheck. They got kids. Sometimes they'll tell you about their kids or what they're going through, but everybody just kind of sucks it up and powers on. And what's different is about people in the arts, whether it be visual arts, 2D or 3D, whether it be music, whether it be writing, whether it be poetry, whether it be dance, theater, whatever, they're processing their emotions, and they're doing it for themselves because they get some personal satisfaction, edification out of doing it. And in so doing, they're communicating through whatever medium they use to their viewers. And if they're successful, it's crack. Like when someone understands you and listens to you and hears your voice or feels what you're doing, your expression, then there's nothing more fulfilling. It's like you did something for someone else. We all have this help button. Crazy cat here. We have this help button where we like to help people. We like to make them feel better, and sometimes wrongly, solve their problems, so that they don't suffer or whatever. So that's kind of enmeshed in this process that we go through to help self and the selves of others evolve in some way. I don't know that we all do the same thing or need to. Maybe I'm expressing it just my own way, but I feel it taps into a fundamental reserve that the artist has. And, when you make a piece of work that really connects with people, I mean, if that's your purpose, in life to communicate with others, and to be understood, it'd be cry cry. You're so elated that someone appreciates you, that someone appreciates your work. We all want to feel valued, I think, in some way. I don't want to make how I feel dependent on what other people think, but it's still there. I think we need to do that and want to do that. And as kids, we're like that, and we want that from our parents. That's the human condition, as I see
Hey,
it.
I like the way you described all of that. Whenever you said, "Hey, tortured artists," like, "Hey, man, there's so many people around us, in each and every person, our neighbors, etc., who are fighting through it." I mean, that is part of the human condition. And just like you reframed the piece that you found, and you put joy into it, and you found the positivity, and you showed that spark of life and creation and looking on the bright side. I like how you added that to the piece, and then also how you added that to your response where you're like, "Hey, yeah, maybe they are tortured, maybe they are going through something, but they're not just letting it set there. They're not letting it remain in a place of distress and a place of negativity. They are creating something and they're putting that out there in the world and they're putting that energy into something that someone else can relate to, can appreciate. They can, like you said, maybe find that connection that is an aha moment in their brain and touches their psyche in a way so that it encourages them to go down a path that, inside that maybe they needed to go on, or is that trigger to take a negative thought spiral and turn it into something positive." So, yeah, I absolutely love the way that you answered it. In terms of the economics of the art piece, what's some of the brutal truths of being a sculptor is to not everyone's in the art world to do it professionally, but for those that are, I mean, what does it take? What kind of skills and character traits are required for someone to really succeed, if you will, in the art world?
That's a fantastic question. I mean, we were in class together with Rick Smith, who's an accomplished artist, artisan in metals and jewelry and sculpture. And he tries to hammer home all the time the need for evolution, self development, refinement of technique, and development of your level of artisanry. If you think about it, why do we buy stuff? What are we doing? It's part of it is consumerism, which is kind of media driven that we have no apparent control over, because psychologists, marketeers have a highly refined sense of what pushes our buttons to want to buy stuff: insecurity, social level, stigmatizing you or developing your social standing amongst others as a result of the tchotchkes you possess. So that's one thing. The other thing is, why do you buy something? You buy it because you like it. Something registers with you. And one of the other things that you do, I think, or that I do, is how good is it? Like sometimes you'll look at something and it's just so freaking good, you have to have it. It's like, I don't care if it's a belt or a handbag, which has name branding and stuff like that. But, if you see a well-made table or a well-made belt or a well-made pot, in ceramics, you're gonna open up your wallet and want to buy it. And it could be impulse purchase. You didn't go out of the house that day thinking that you're going to buy, like a 4 foot tall metal sculpture or a coffee pot or a ceramic vase that you're going to make sauerkraut in or something, But then you go to a craft fair and you look at this shelf and all of a sudden it's like, wow, look at that thing. Someone really did something. They imparted something into that work that you interpret as quality, that you value, and that you're going to want to have. So, if an artist wants to make money, they got to make good stuff. And the average Joe that's shopping on that off that shelf may not even know what good stuff is technically. But when you lift like a ceramic pot, sometimes it just seems too heavy. It's like Goldilocks. Like
Yeah.
it's too heavy. You grab it and you run your fingers along the walls of the vessel, when you go from the bottom to the top, and it's uneven. or it's thicker in one area. Like someone didn't finish this thing right, right? So even though you like the way it looks, you may not purchase it because something feels a little off on it.
Mhm.
Same goes with a painting. You see a painting, you didn't walk into the gallery or whatever, or the artist studio thinking that you're going to buy, generally, that you're going to buy a work of art for them for your wall. But I have a painting right now in my study that I bought because I walked down the hallway and it was at the end of a hallway and it was big and it just lit up. The sun hit it just right. And I was like, I want that. And then I have it in my van, taking it home. And now I'm driving home. I'm going, where am I going to put this thing? It's like 5 feet by 6 feet. I hardly have any wall space in this house. Where it's sitting now, it's leaning against my bookshelves because that's where it is. And I want to look at it. There you go. Classic example of that. And, we're programmed to be shoppers these days. Facebook, social media, now Facebook's they're trying to sell AI stuff, AI girlfriends, AI boyfriends,
Oh
like
my.
AI paper writers. And we're getting bombarded by that stuff. I feel sorry for anyone that's like 12 years old and, they got to grow up. They got to maneuver their way through this stuff and be a person, be themselves. It's scary. So I've
Yes.
gone on a tangent. Basically, starving artist wise, you're going to starve if you don't make good work. And even if you do, there's plenty of examples of starving artists, that starved their whole lives. And after they croaked, all of a sudden someone wants their work. And the other thing is, if you don't want to be a starving artist, then be a smart one. Like make good work, learn business chops. A gallerist isn't going to do this stuff for you. You think it's a big deal to be in an art gallery? They're starving too. They're waiting there. I worked at an art gallery in Santa Fe for a friend a couple winters ago. And some days there were like two people that walked through the gallery. So what did I do? I cleared my Gmail account of all the old mail I had because I had like 50,000 emails or something. So I had all that time to do it. Could you imagine having to pay rent and utilities and own a place and no one's coming into your place to buy art? You're nearly suicidal, right? Like, and they have high overhead, like Santa Fe is not a cheap rental market, so I don't know what those guys pay for a gallery space, but they got to sell art in order to live and make money. So you have to learn marketing. You have to be present. You have to put your work in front of people, an audience that has money to buy art with. So you got to go to fairs. You got to go to another city, where they have fairs to sell stuff. What happens there? You're in a stupid booth. Hundreds of people walk by you every day with their ice creams and popcorn or whatever. And they maybe look at your stuff, maybe they won't. They just walk by and you're just kind of like, please come talk to me. Look at my stuff. They're gonna just have dinner for a good time. It's Sunday afternoon. It's like a cheap date. You go get something, you walk around, you look at art. Maybe you'll get something as a memory, a memento of that day, or you just don't know what's going to happen. And then other times, it's just pure blind, dumb luck. You make a nice piece, someone hears about it, someone sees it, and they're interested. The message is right, and they'll buy it from you. What do a lot of artists do? They spend so much time waiting for that moment. They lose their business chops, they get desperate, and they undersell themselves. So something that they put 80 hours into making, they're going to sell for something that's just barely enough to get by, where they're making like $3 an hour if they added up all their time, their hour, their driving, their fuel to get to the fair, the entry fee to get to the fair, all the running back and forth from one studio space to another, running to the to the art store to get supplies. That's all your time. You're on the
Absolutely.
clock, and if you don't know that, you're going to be a starving artist. And you're going to wonder why you're having a hard time. And what are you going to do? You're going to find another job. You're going to be working in a bar, or being an accountant, or, and saying you're an artist, And weirdly, even though all that stuff happens, people value artists. Like my brother will talk about his son, my nephew, and he'll always use the adjective or the phrase, he's an artist. And I'm like, he's an artist. He's living in your basement, and he's 30 years old. And, he's having to do other stuff instead of doing art. He's very talented, but I shouldn't talk about family.
Yeah.
But, it's true. That's a fundamental truth. So I hear people describe their friends or whatever all the time, and they'll say, oh, he's an artist or she's an artist. And quietly, we all go, cool. Nice. This is a person in our society that has some special value that people think they have, and they value that. Now, in the United States, not so much. It's still happening here. I'm talking from the United States. But in Europe, if I wanted to go panhandle as a street performer in the United States, good luck. Those guys are struggling. In Europe, I could do the same thing and I'll make probably 2 to 3 times the money that I would make in the United States.
Wow.
Like, and I did performance art. I have done performance art, and I did it at the Venice Biennale in 2012 or 16, I forget. Maybe 16 or 18. And I did it as part of an art show at some palazzo, and then just for kicks, I put my costume on and I went to the front gates of the Venice Biennale where all these people were pulling up on water taxis to go in to, where everybody in the world goes to view this art. It's representative of every country. I was just like panhandling there. And people were coming up to me as soon as I got out the water taxi. They want to stand next to me. They have their picture taken in front of the Venice Biennale sign behind me. And stupidly, if I had a hat or a box on the ground and next to me, I would have made a killing, you know? And I was just doing this on the fly, like I was going to catch a train to go to Milan or something. And I had a few hours and, so I did this. But when I was leaving, I was like, to myself, I was like, dude, you need to stay here, get a hat, and make some of that airfare money back, and stupidly, I didn't do it, but I could have and should have. So, and I have other friends that are street performers that in Europe, wherever they set up, people appreciate the arts and they help fund the starving artists, so they value the fact that someone's taken some time to make a costume, to entertain them, to communicate with them, to have them do like a paradigm shift. That's one of my goals as an artist is to interact with other people in a way that engages them so that when they walk away, they're a little bit changed and maybe their life's a little bit better. So that's my purpose as an artist, to do that.
That's
That
great. I love it. I love the things, the values that you're imparting there as well about, hey, it takes constant growth. We're constantly evolving, learning, growing. So if you're wanting to be a professional artist in the sense that you're getting paid for it, you're covering living expenses, whatever those may be, or whatever level that may be, that you're encouraging that consistency. You're encouraging spending the time to get your craftsmanship up to a higher level because that's what potential buyers look for. Yes, they like that feeling, they like that sensation, but whenever they pick it up and they look at it and they feel the balance, the weight, however it is that they're interacting with it, those are all things that could encourage the potential buyer or discourage them. So I really like how you've definitely said, hey, man, it's not just about the art. It's not just about the act of creating. It's the act also of growing yourself, growing your abilities into other areas that you might not be as comfortable with, be that business, financial, marketing, all of these things these wonderful things that you've mentioned. And then beyond that, you've got to put yourself out there. You've got to go to the shows. You've got to be the street vendor, the street performer, whatever it might be, but you've got to market yourself, get yourself out there so that you can get yourself and your work in front of a large audience.
Yep.
So thank you for sharing that. So we started with the Burning Man, and I just like kind of following the conversation and the flow, but I do want to circle back there because that
Yeah.
is what I guess maybe the most curious about. So how did you find yourself going to Burning Man? Were you going there just as someone who was experiencing the event? Or from what I understand, in either one of these works, you went there and you helped out, you were involved in the event. So tell me that story.
Yeah, thank you. I've been there in many capacities, in many personal roles. One as